Welcome to Beyond the Pod, presented by SodaStick.com.
Brunette, he moves, Brunette Beckett, he scores! Minnesota has upset the Colorado Avalanche! Andrew Brunette, the game-winning goal!
Here are your hosts, the second greatest scorer in Gopher hockey history, Pat Micheletti, and the second greatest hockey analyst on this podcast, Brandon Mileski.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Pod. Brandon Mileski, along with former Golden Gopher great Pat Micheletti. As always, hello, Patrick.
Good morning, Brandon. Good to see you.
Great to see you as always. As always, Beyond the Pod is brought to you by SodaStick.com. Patrick, I was at the Mikko Koivu jersey retirement ceremony at XL Energy Center. I ran into former assistant Wild GM Jim Mill and thought to myself, it'd be kind of fun to talk about kind of the Mikko Koivu era when he was here, and there was so much going on during that time.
Yep.
So Jim is now thankfully joining us now. Jim, like I said, you're the former assistant GM for the Minnesota Wild and the GM for the Houston Aeros from 2009 to 2015. Really appreciate your time. You are now working with the New Jersey Devils. Can you tell us kind of what your role is within that scouting department with the Devils?
Yeah, first of all, Pat, Brandon, good to see you guys. It's been a few years, so thanks for having me on today. I'm excited about it. Geez, time flies. I was with Minnesota for 7 years, left the Wild. Ray Shero hired me with the Devils. I started out doing a lot of amateur, a little bit of pro, some college. And once Ray left,
We're having some more connection issues with Jim Mill. Now he's for those watching on the KFN YouTube channel, he's upside down. Pat, you can go to SodaStick.com right now to get your original Minnesota sports inspired goods. If you haven't seen the stuff yet, you got to check it out. All their apparel screen printed here in Minnesota on super soft, super comfy shirts. You will love it, and we're going to hook you up with 15% off your next order. So use the code KFN for 15% off. That is SodaStick.com, SotaStick.com. Original Minnesota sports inspired goods. Use the code KFN for 15% off your next order. And it was, as we'll get to with Jim when he gets back on, Pat, is that era from 2009 to 2015 when he was here with Chuck Fletcher as a GM.
Yep.
Pretty interesting time transitioning from Jacques Lemaire no longer being the coach.
Right.
And just a complete transition. Ends up getting into the Parisi and Suter area. It was an interesting time as they were trying to kind of rebuild what Jacques had already built, though kind of put them behind the eight ball a little bit as well because he was so good of a coach.
Right. And a different style of play that I think that we'll let Jim expand on it, but that they wanted to not get away from, but change a little bit because Jacques' system, the players that Jacques had at the time, they had to play a certain way to win. And the new regime comes in, and not that they changed a whole ton, but they I think they tried their best to be a little bit more offensive, to get more dynamic players in, and All
right, Jim joins us back again. Hopefully the connection is good now. Jim, you were telling us about your time with the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah, so it was so Ray hired me, did amateur, did some pro, did a little bit of college, ran college, and then when Tommy Fitzgerald took over as GM, he named me director of pro scouting. So I've been doing pro scouting and director of pro scouting for the last 3 years and 2.5 years, whatever, and it's been great. Really enjoying it.
I want to ask you, when you go from organization to organization, different leadership, it's the game of hockey, right? I mean, it's the game of hockey. But is there a big change in how operations work? I know philosophy probably a little bit, but how much really changes, from organization to organization?
Well, that's a really good question. I think the more experience you have, the better you are. Like, I know I'm a lot better management, scout, executive today than I was when Chuck hired me here in Minnesota 12, 13 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fact. We are with a lot of these things. Chuck and Ray worked together, right? And then Chuck hired me in Minnesota. And
Right.
then Ray ends up in New Jersey, and I go to New Jersey, and Tommy Fitzgerald was in Pittsburgh with Billy Guerin and Chuck and Ray. So, and now he's in New Jersey. So, I mean, philosophies definitely change because everybody is their own person. That being said, some of the basis of the game and the belief of, running an organization and how to do that, it would be similar, I would assume. Well, I know I've experienced it. Pittsburgh Penguins had a great deal of success, and they're not going to deviate from that too much because it worked. So, as the game evolves, you evolve, and management evolves, and experience, and you bring other things, and and Chuck is different than Ray, and Ray is different than Fitzy, and they're all different than Billy, and we're all different, but we're all a little bit the same.
All right, Jim. I'm hoping you can let us inside the thinking of the front office during your time with the Minnesota Wild. When you joined in 2009, as Pat and I were just talking about, it was kind of a transition time where Jacques Lemaire had been the head coach up until that point. You get a new coach, trying to change the roster a little bit and change the style of play. What was kind of the blueprint for you guys at that time? What were you thinking about the plan moving forward right when you first joined in with the Wild?
Well, it was a tall order coming in, and especially for Todd Richards. I mean, he had to take over after a legendary Hall of Fame coach, player, and Jacques, and did such an amazing job of leading this organization, him and Doug, for all those years. So the transition was obviously hard. Todd had a certain way he wanted to play that he had successes with when he was a head coach in Wilkes-Barre, and I'm sure coaches want, that's what leads to their success, and that leads to their it's no different than Mike Yeo or Bruce Boudreau or Dean Evison. You bring with you what got you to this point. But if the team doesn't fit, that's a little challenging. I think it was pretty tough on Todd that first year. We didn't have the players to play the way that Todd wanted to play, especially transitioning from the way Jacques played. So it took a couple of years to catch up, and some changes and huge signings in Parisi and Suter, and a couple. There was 400 or 500 point years. That's some pretty good hockey, and we had to go through Chicago every year, which they were the best team in the world for the better part of a decade, give or take. You learn, you experience, good enough, obviously, but it wasn't probably as bad as people think either.
I want to go back to the Brent Burns trade in 2011. Obviously, that's a sore spot for some Minnesota Wild fans. I was under the impression that you guys were almost kind of like forced to trade him. That he just wasn't going to work with him in Minnesota. What was the kind of the story and the thinking behind trading Brent Burns to San Jose?
Well, there was a couple of really funny stories because we were hosting the draft, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And we were mic'd up, Chuck and Brent and myself, and Doug and Chuck had met for days leading up to the draft to try to get this deal done. And I think with Burnsy at the time, and I'm not speaking for Chuck specifically, but we probably weren't at a point yet to be able to take that, not leap of faith, but to give him that big contract that he probably had earned and was going to get, right? I don't think we were, in our projection as an organization, there to do that yet. And we didn't have the surrounding pieces. So I don't think we thought we were going to be able to get it done. So we had to move them and get other parts, which helped the team. But I remember on the draft floor when we were going to make the announcement, I don't know if it was Chuck or somebody's like, this is going to be interesting because they just might boo us. Like they just might go crazy here. Like 18,900 fans in Xcel Energy Center. They just might throw stuff at us. But they didn't, and they were excited, and it was a deal to change the organization, and worked out great for Burnsy, and he's an amazing player, defenseman, athlete, and and things change.
I want to go to your career. You mentioned it, from amateur scouting to college to the college rank, the pro rank, and I want to talk about when a player is ready. How do you know when a player's ready? I mean, I look at your number one draft pick, who will be playing in the Frozen Four tonight, Luke Hughes, and the kid's phenomenal, right? I mean, 17 goals. I mean, he's just one of the he might end up being a better skater than his brother in Vancouver. I mean, and the tools. He's got it all. But how do you guys project when a player is ready? Because we certainly know he has the skills to play in the National Hockey League today. But where's that line of, yeah, should we sign him or give him another year?
Well, that's a challenge, right? That's a challenge going back to days when I was, running Houston and Iowa, and who's ready? Is Zucker ready to get called up again? He's been on a yo-yo? Is Jason ready? Is Matt Dumba ready? Is Jonas Brodin ready? Is Granny ready? Like, I think the players tell you when they're ready by the way that they play. When you don't master a league, but when you play so well that you dominate a league, especially if you can do that at the American League level, or if you can do that at the college level. I mean, I remember seeing Cal McCarr at UMass, and he stayed an extra year. He stayed an extra year. He certainly could have come out. He stayed the extra year, got to Hobie. They lost to UMD in the finals, and he signed with Colorado. And holy mackerel, he was the best player, one of the best defensemen in the league. Because he was ready. Now that doesn't always happen, as you know.
Right.
But I don't think you can, but Cal was ready, and it wasn't our decision. Obviously, it was Colorado's. But you just knew that guy was beyond where he was playing. So that's what I mean by the players tell you that. And it'll be a big weekend for Luke. It's not a make it or break it. Is he ready? I don't know. It's harder for defensemen. Are we ready to, as an organization? I mean, Colorado was set up in a really good way. At a peak of being very, very good. So you put a player like Cal into that lineup, and they were already running, 100 miles an hour. And it would certainly work for them. Now we're not Colorado yet. So, that's going to be discussions and conversations and decisions to be made. But great questions. And I don't know if there's a right answer.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of wrong answers because guys come out too early.
Yeah.
I'm going to dig back into your Minnesota Wild days. You mentioned the Parisi Suter signings back in 2012. Obviously, that completely transformed this franchise at the time. I remember going to a season ticket meeting with, and Craig Leopold was there, and it was like in February of that year. And he kind of alluded to two guys on the market that they'd be going after and wanting to get those two. At what stage did you think, hey, we can land both of these guys? And was that something that had been months leading up to it, or did you not know until the ink was on the paper? What was that entire process of trying to bring those two guys here?
Well, that was one of the most incredible July 4th ever. Like, I know people were up at the cabin listening, and we were in the office, and it was absolutely amazing.
You forced me to go into work that day, Jim.
Yeah, you and a lot of people. And I think the Wild.
I was there all day.
Wild ordered pizzas for all the and the Wild, we ordered about 1 million pizzas for all the people trying to sell tickets that day. So all the people doing the real work, but it was an exciting time. But we were going to go after them as soon as free agency hit. We had our plan. We were well prepared, and I think it was actually the players that put themselves together and here. I don't think going into it, we certainly did not think that we were going to be able to get them both. We were going to try. And, it was probably everybody had a little bit of, maybe Zach, maybe Suits goes here, maybe Zach goes there. And then it just came together at the end, and it came together, I think, on July 3rd or 4th. We kind of knew on the 3rd, I think. And then it was announced, and it was special, and it did change the organization in an extremely positive light. Just think what the last 10, 12 years would have been, with the exception of the last 2 years, without those guys, and I alluded to it, 6 or 5 or 6, whatever it is, 100-point seasons, getting through the first round, beating Colorado, having to go to Chicago for round 2. That was, those are special. That doesn't happen very often. And it did, and obviously wasn't good enough, but it wasn't so bad either.
Pat and I have talked many times before without this, the entire Parisi Suter run of the one team that we thought had a chance in the playoffs was the one that got to the second, beat Colorado, or no, I think it might have been St. Louis that year. You played Chicago in the second round. You had the puck go off the stanchion. Patrick Kane scores in overtime at Game 6. We thought that was kind of your best team that was playing well at that time. What was kind of the emotions after that stanchion thing happened and that season and ended? And did you guys think you guys had a chance to make a run there?
Absolutely, we did, and that's one of those things when winning teams like Chicago. When a team's on a run. I mean, Minnesota's done it this year. There's games they're not going to lose. They're going to win. I don't care if they're down, 2-3 goals going into the third. They come back. They're going to win. And that's the kind of swagger. And it's not just luck because they're way more than luck. They were incredible teams, the Chicago Blackhawks. But those breaks are made through great players, and they were lucky, but they were great. So, at that point, you're right. I mean, the guys, it was pretty devastating because you're like, how are we going to beat these guys? Like, why can't it go in off a stanchion for us? We're the ones that need the help, not them.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's pro sports.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, the league seems to be getting better and better and better every year. And I mean, unfortunately, your organization is not going to make the playoffs this year. So we can talk about the other teams a little bit. And the East is, I mean, it is loaded with Carolina, Florida, Tampa, the Rangers, Boston, Toronto. Any one of those teams could really come out of the East this year. Is that a fair statement? Pittsburgh.
Even Pittsburgh. I mean, anytime Sidney Crosby's in the lineup,
right?
He's amazing. I mean, yeah, don't forget about him. But yeah, I mean that the East. What's interesting about the East versus the West? Obviously, the East is set up like the 8 teams for the most part, right? So now it's jockeying, and is it Florida? Is it Tampa? Is it Carolina? I mean, Florida's on an amazing run. They're an incredible team. I mean, we blew a 4-goal lead Saturday afternoon. Frickin' Bruno, So, but it's their year, and they're loaded, and they're getting the goaltending, and they've got some of their young D have developed, and their forwards Barkov and Huberdeau. I mean, they're a well-built team. It'll be interesting to see. Like how it goes, and Tampa had to go through it too. Very rarely do teams just run the table, right? Usually it's a bit of a process, and I'm not saying it will be for them because last year they're in the playoffs too, and maybe they take that this year. Toronto, who knows? If they get goaltending, then they're a force. Boston's always a great team because you have Bergeron, Marchand, and then they add Lindholm. Holy cow, they're loaded. And then don't forget about Carolina and Pitt and the Rangers. I mean, anytime we already talked about Pittsburgh, so it's going to be interesting. And you have to. Oh yeah, and the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champs, Tampa Bay, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
So and they have the best goalie on the planet, or one of them, whatever, top 2-3. So the East will be really interesting. In the West, it's still open. I mean, I saw Winnipeg lost last night, so it's kind of taking shape. But who plays who is a complete crapshoot right now, right? Who are the Wild going to face? Who I mean, probably Calgary, Carolina. I mean, Calgary and Colorado are probably 1 and 2, but beyond that, it could be any combination.
Well, I know because you're based here, you probably see the Minnesota Wild a decent amount. What do you think of this current Minnesota Wild roster? You're talking about the process of Florida, getting to the first round. Can they make that jump to the Stanley Cup? The Wild are kind of in that same boat, and Pat and I have talked about that. It's not often a team just goes from not winning a series to winning the entire thing. That usually you kind of take steps along the way. Where do you think the Wild are in that process right now in the Western Conference? All right, we'll drop him for a second, Pat. Where do you think the Wild are? I'll ask you, Pat.
Well, I think you and I have talked about it a bunch of times. I think the time is now for them to try to make that run because of what they're facing in the next couple of years. I like where they're at. I like how they're built. I like what the additions. I think that has made them someone to be worthy of. Now, a lot of things have to go your way. We both know that going into the playoffs. And yeah, it's funny to see the emotions of the fan base now after every game. It's we're up here, we're down here. Oh, we can't beat Nashville because they beat us. They beat us 3 times. And oh, did we match up? Well, we can't face them. Again, I think they have enough talent. I think they have enough goal scoring. I think they can defend well enough. And I think they're pretty confident in their goaltending. So, you know what? I give them a chance to make a run. Well, that we'll see.
All right, Jim Mill rejoins us. Jim, I was asking you about where you think the Wild are in their process of, what do you think of the current state of the Wild and their chances in the West?
Well, that was a fortuitous drop by me. One of my best friends is a GM there, and I still have in Minnesota. I still have a place in my heart for the Wild, obviously. And Billy and I grew up together and played junior hockey together, and
really?
He's done a hell of a job with this team. The pieces they needed to add were pieces that are, playoff teams need to fortify, and they did a great job doing that. Whether it be Middleton, a little bit of sandpaper size grit on the back end, who's tough. Delorier, who's as tough as anybody except for Nick Seeler the other day.
Oh, yeah. How about that?
Good Eden Prairie boy. He did all right, eh? He did all right, eh?
Yeah.
Eden Prairie boy
He's
did pretty
tough.
well for himself. But anyway,
no,
Delorier's tough. So, and so is Nicky. But anyway, so, what they've added plus what they have in Kaprasov and the year Fiala's having, and when Greenway gets going and the leadership that they have from Foligno and Spurgey, obviously my boy Spurgey, and in that D core, and then and Billy did a great job. Like the one thing's not a question mark because everybody forgets Cam Talbot was an All-Star this year. He wasn't the All-Star team. He's a pretty good goalie, and they go out and they add Marc-Andre Fleury, Vezina Trophy winner and Stanley Cup champion. I mean, those are big ads, and that team has as much chance as anybody in the West. And I'm partial to Colorado. I just think the way that they're built. But that's easy to say because they're the best team points wise in the league again this year. But they were they're a team that's taken that step. Colorado is, and they had a little bit of a reset, right? Because they got bounced last year. I remember game 1 and 2. I was in Colorado. They just dominated Vegas. Game 1, Vegas didn't. Oh my God, Vegas didn't touch the puck game 1, and game 2 was kind of back and forth, and they kind of let them back in. But I think they got off to a 4-goal lead early, and then Vegas kind of climbed their way back, and then Vegas kind of took over, and then Colorado got lucky in overtime. Great play and goal, and you figure, well, that series might not 2-0, not over, and it wasn't because then Vegas rolled 4. So they're a team.
Do you think? I mean, Colorado has to be feeling the pressure, right? I mean, we've been talking about looks like Colorado, for the last 3-4 years, and they haven't been able to get there. Minnesota, on the other hand, right? There's a thing called a cap. And do you think Billy, in the back of his mind really knows that, hey, we have to do something this year because of what we're facing in the next 2-3 years with the cap hits out of, from the buyouts?
Well, you'd have to ask him. He's too good of a friend, and that's Craig and his business. But yeah, I would say that any year you have a year like them that they've had, why wouldn't you go for it? Cap aside, when you have the season that they've had, you try to win every year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't. Maybe it's out there, maybe it's not. Maybe next year, whatever. The fact of the matter is, this team, as Colorado, as probably St. Louis, as Calgary, as Florida, as Tampa, they all have a chance to win the cup for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm probably missing somebody. So yeah, why wouldn't you? And I just think he's done a great job with what they needed to do. And yeah, good for them.
Jim, I'm not sure of your exact timeline of when in 2015 you left the Wild, but were you part of the draft room that year? And I asked that because and that draft is contributing greatly to this team right now with Joel Eriksson Ek in the first round, Jordan Greenway in the second round, and then Kirill Kaprizov in the fifth round. Were you part of that draft room? And then if so, what was the thinking specifically on Kaprizov?
I was around it. I was not very involved with that draft. I was there,
okay.
But I was not, and I was in the room, but I was not a part of any decision making. So I'm not going to claim any credit for that one. That was Chuck. No chance. That was Chuck. And hell of a job.
All right. How about 2010 when you guys drafted Mikhail Granlund? I know at one point after you guys drafted him, he was listed as like the top prospect in all of hockey. He's had a good career. Did you guys think at the time that this guy had superstar potential when you drafted him?
I think that we thought he could be probably what he is, a hell of a good hockey player. Mm-hmm. Scored a great goal for us, right? He scored that goal in Minnesota. I see the picture all the time in the press box. It's almost the Bobby Orr picture. It's not, but it's close. Like Colorado to force Game 7. Mikko wins it in Colorado. We go on to Chicago. I go to that again. Grant, he's done a hell of a job adjusting after his trade to Nashville. He's one of the guys that drives that team in Nashville. He's even more of a leader, even more of a driver there. And there was a ton of pressure on him here to drive offense here. And he's got pieces there that certainly help in Forsberg and and a few others, Duchesne and so forth. But I think Granny was, he probably is, he's fantastic, and he probably is.
All right. Well, that was going to be the last question for Jim anyway. So Jim Mill, former Minnesota Wild assistant GM, appreciate his time for joining us. Pat, to wrap up the show here, the Frozen Four, we're taping this on a Thursday morning. So the Frozen Four begins tonight. So there are people that might listen to this today and be able to hear your predictions, or they'll be listening tomorrow or Saturday and they'll hear whether you got it right or wrong. So let's begin with Minnesota versus Minnesota State Mankato. What do you see tonight?
Well, first off, I will say this Frozen Four, I think, will be the best Frozen Four that we've seen in quite some time. I think the four best teams in college hockey are at the Frozen Four. And, I've had a chance to see pretty much, every team and this season. And I tell you what, it's gonna be a great Frozen Four. Minnesota and Minnesota State is going to be, I hate to say the cat and mouse, the chess game, Minnesota is going to have to match the physicality and the will to fight through the wall that Minnesota State will put up. And for Minnesota to win the game, they have to make Minnesota State feel a little bit uncomfortable. Harvard did that at the end of the game, but it wasn't enough to overcome Minnesota State. I tell you, I think it's going to be a great game. It's really hard for me to predict because I could make a case for any four of the teams to win the national title this year. That's how close all of them are. I'm going to go with my gut and give the edge to Minnesota tonight. Michigan, Denver. A lot of people at the beginning of the year said, how could anyone beat Michigan, with their 7 first-round draft picks? They've got great goaltending. I've mentioned Luke Hughes, who's a number 1 draft pick. I've mentioned, Owen Power, who was a number 1 overall draft pick. Matty Beniers. This team is absolutely loaded. Most talented team in the tournament. However, Denver, as a group of forwards, might have the best collection of forwards from 1 through 4, and they get after it. They play hard. They're well coached. Bobby Brink, who is from Minnetonka here, leads the nation in scoring, and there's not many as good around the net as he is. They're confident. They believe in themselves. It would not surprise me if Denver wins the game tonight. So I'm going to go Denver versus Minnesota in the national championship.
And
then I will. Brandon. Honestly, I really. This is hard because I don't really know. I can't really make a prediction on who will be your national champion.
It's too hard, anyways. I mean, hockey.
It really,
once you get to this level where you have 4 teams that are basically kind of even, I know they're not all the same stylistic type of teams, but I mean, these are 4 of the best teams in the country. They have been for a good portion of the year. You know hockey, Pat. Like the psychological aspect of it. There is a luck component that can happen at times. A lot of this stuff is very unpredictable, which is why it's
really
fun to
hard
watch.
Because and that's the great thing. We have 4 great teams in the tournament, and any one of them could win it. So it's going to be fun.
It sounds like you wanted to pick Denver there. This is kind of what I got out of that.
I tell you what, they're sneaky. They're the team that's not being talked about going into this tournament.
Yeah,
big Minnesota, right. Big Minnesota State, big Michigan with everything.
Yeah,
and then there's Denver. In fact, I have to quick story. I'm good friends with one of the assistant coaches for Denver, and he sent me a text, and he said, little old Denver just keeps chugging away. And,
that's awesome.
Like, come on, coach, but to a certain degree, he's right. He's right. And, but they're awfully good, and people will enjoy how they play the game.
One wild thing before we get to stick taps and then get out of here. Matt Dumba, another upper body injury. He hurt himself on an interference penalty that he never should have even delivered that check because it was so late. But he's hurt his pectoral in a fight. He's hurt a shoulder in a fight. This appeared, I know they just say upper body injury, but it kind of looks like a shoulder thing. He's kind of getting a history now of getting hurt in the same area on his body, and I think that's got to be not only concerning in the short term because you would need him for the playoff run, but long term, if you want him past this season, you got to start thinking about this stuff.
Durability, and I think he ended up getting a penalty on that hit.
Yes, he did.
And
it was a penalty.
And it was a penalty. It was the right call.
It was really late.
It really concerns me because we're looking forward, right? We're looking forward in the future, and what are they going to do this summer? And that's got to be a factor that they consider. Can he stay healthy? Oh, I mean, because we can have him back at that number, but he's going to be out for 20, 25 games throughout the year. And if we're going to use a comparison of Kevin Fiala, has he missed a game? I don't think he has.
He was suspended. He was suspended, I think, for one of them. But
yeah. But so those are things that you got to think about. Listen, I think Matt, again, he loves it here, and we can talk about all the good things, and there are plenty of good things, but you have to look at everything. So I hope it's not too serious, because they need him healthy for the playoffs.
All right, Pat, are you ready for your stick tap today?
I am. Brandon,
go ahead.
This is out to the Motzko family. There was a great article today in the Star Tribune. Randy Johnson did a terrific job of writing the article. Not an easy article to write, and with the loss of Bob's son and what the family went through all season, and I'm really happy. I'm really happy for Bob and the family that they got to where they are. And it's not about getting to the Frozen Four. It's just how he's handled everything. And so I don't know how I would. And so stick tap to their family.
Yeah, that's a very worthy stick tap. I have 3 stick taps, actually, Pat. I don't know if I can do 3, but one would be Ava Gascon. She was the first woman goalie to win a Quebec Major Junior League hockey game since the year 2000. So that's pretty awesome. Yep. Kirill Kaprizov, I'd like to give a stick tap to him for breaking Marian Gabourik's single-season points record for the Minnesota Wild. He also has 40 goals now, and he's 2 away from the franchise record for most goals in a season. And then finally, our guest last week, Mike Hastings, won the Spencer Penrose Award, which is the National Coach of the Year. 2nd consecutive year, 3rd time he's won it. which he's joining elite company with coaches that have won it 3 times. So another impressive season out of Mike Hastings. And those are my 3 stick taps for today.
And all good ones.
All right, Pat, we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Brandon. Take care.
All right, he's Pat Micheletti. I'm Brandon Mileski. This has been another episode of Beyond the Pod. As always, it's brought to you by sodastick.com. And we will talk to you next week right here on Beyond the Pod. Have a great week. Bye.